All right. Welcome to the Return to Service podcast. I'm your host, Chris. I'm here with Wade Hall, logistics manager at Clemens Aviation. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So we were talking a few weeks ago and we were talking about like financials and the operation. And so I want to spend some time diving into what makes that up and what do you look for and how do you plan some of these things out? How do you keep things on track when they're going off course? How do you detect it? All that kind of stuff. But before we get into it, I want to get a quick rundown of Clemens Aviation. So I know you guys do charter, you have maintenance, management, there's avionics. So quite a bit that you guys are doing up there in Wichita. So yeah, if you can give a quick rundown, what do you guys do and who are the kind of customers that you serve?
Yeah, so Clemens Aviation as a whole, the core of our business is our beach jets. So we have 28 beach jets. That's kind of the heart of our business, and we manage them, maintain them, charter them, sell them, work on them, everything you can imagine with them. And that drives kind of the core of what we do. So most
Okay.
of day to day operations are just around those. So we're flying them, we're staffing the pilots, we're chartering them out, we're booking flights for our customers on those, and then we're maintaining them, upgrading them when applicable. Selling shares of them, all that kind of stuff. And then outside of that, it kind of we've grown and branched into all the individual segments of that. So we have a maintenance shop, does the maintenance on them, does the avionics. We have a paint shop now, as well as we have an FBO that just is open to the public, but it grew out of the need of an FBO just for those beach jets. Um, yeah, that's about it, really. But
Okay. So
just expanding.
it started off as then in it sounds like it started off as like a charter management kind of piece. Is that really where the core was?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. More management. So the charter came later. We do a lot of 91. So we'll purchase an aircraft and then sell out shares of it and manage those shares for customers. And that's really the core of our customer base is just managing aircraft for people. And then that's slowly grown into, well, now we need to maintain these aircraft, and now we want to start charter, and now we need a place to put them and an FBO to support them. So it's all just grown out of that.
Okay. And you said you started there 8 years ago and there was 6 or 8 technicians.
Yeah, yeah. At that time, when I very first started, I think there were actually four. So there were four guys working in the maintenance shop. I was the sole line guy, so I was fueling and towing all the airplanes, and then there were the owners of the business, and that was pretty much it. Um, so we've grown a lot from then. It's pretty crazy
Where how many people are there now?
um, in total, our company I think is about 130. Um,
Okay.
Out of that, we're about 50 technicians between the different maintenance shops. So that's inclusive of the jet maintenance shop, the piston shop, and an avionics shop. And then we just opened a paint shop. And then probably about 20 to 30 on the FBO and management side. And then the rest is all made up of pilots. So,
Okay. What is that? So I know. So you're the logistics manager. It's a wearer of many hats. I'm very familiar with that type of role.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So you've been in this. You started on the line, and then you saw it grow. So what has that process been like going from that small company, pretty tight knit? You're kind of one man band on that side. And then what was the next kind of phase of the business that you guys grew into? And what was that like making that transition and how did the business kind of change?
Yeah, gotcha. That's a good question. So a good like turn point would be around 2021, 22. We actually moved facilities. So we were at a different airport. The owner of our company actually owns an airport in Benton, Kansas. It's Stearman Field. So that's where everything started. Um, and we grew there to probably about maybe 15 or 20 mechanics, and we were all housed in one building. So we had a avionic or not avionics piston shop, jet shop, all there. We were all combined. 10 to 15 guys. We didn't have an FBO, but our jet ops were all going in and out of there, all just at the same spot. And so when we moved to this new facility that we're at now, which is at the Jabara Airport in Wichita, that was a pretty big turn point, and that's when we like really went from tight knit to really blowing up, and started hiring a lot more people. Business started growing a lot. There's just a lot more visibility here at this airport, so a lot more going on. As far as just managing that and the growth and how it changed, I think that's really when a lot of like system implementation needed to happen. Um,
Yep.
I think that's actually coincidentally about the same time we started getting involved in EBIS. At that point, it would have been 3.2, so
Okay.
not cloud based yet. But before that, we were paperwork orders. We use a time clock app that's separate outside of EBIS. So trying to keep track of guys' time. The more you add, the more that is to manage, and then they're transferring everything that's happening to paperwork orders and all the parts. Didn't have a great inventory system, so started getting pretty hectic pretty fast. The more we grow, the more people we add, the more airplanes we work on, and that's when we really started needing a solution for that, and that's where you guys came in, I would say. um,
Cool.
does that answer your question very well?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess if we can just pull on that thread a little bit in that time of transition as you're growing and as you kind of have these systems in place, like you have the paper pieces and you're kind of tracking everything pretty manually in a way, but it works at a certain size, and then when you hit a certain size and you move into it, like the wheels kind of fall off a little bit.
Yep.
And if you're proactive, you get ahead of it and it's just like normal growing pains. But I'm actually curious, and you don't have to air too much dirty laundry, so don't overshare if you don't want. But I'm kind of curious in those times when you were running into that, like what were some like real situations or examples of where you were like, okay, we have grown to a point where we need to actually change what we're doing. Like, this is what we're doing today on X process or whatever it is not working. We kind of see, here's the headache that it's causing us. Like, here, we need to make a switch, whatever that ends up being. But like, are there any kind of vivid examples that you can think of on that side?
um, it's hard for me to nail down like one specific instance.
Sure.
From like a slightly broader term, I know a couple areas like that were pretty rough were like our inventory management. It
Okay.
was just non-existent before we made the switch. We use QuickBooks for all of our accounting features, and QuickBooks does have an inventory kind of system, but the way we're using it was not accurate, not right, not good, and so that's just one specific area where as we grow and there's more parts coming in and out, there's more projects that parts are getting tagged to and on and off, and paper, they're trying to record what parts get used on a paperwork order, and who knows if that's going to make it to the right spot. That was a specific area where the bigger you get, the worse it was getting, and it was a known issue.
Sure.
Just it could spiral out of control pretty quick. It never did too bad, but it was definitely an area as we grew and continued to grow, it was only getting worse, and so we needed a solution there. um, One other thing, maybe a little more specifically, that was an issue. Um, One thing that we were really interested with on EBIS, and a big reason we pushed to move to it, was involved in the work order completion kind of side of it. So you can put all your data in, and then it can pretty instantaneously move along the track to being a log entry, and then being
Hmm.
an invoice to give your customer. So one issue we were having previous to that, like I said, being on paper, the guys were writing down times, they were writing down corrective actions, they're writing down what parts they took, and then that all physically is getting transferred to a log entry manually, like in Microsoft Word, and then once that's done, that's physically getting transferred and made into an invoice. So all those parts, all those corrective actions, it's getting basically written and transferred 3 times, and that's awful time suck. Our goal, when a project gets done is, customers here to pick up the airplane. They have a log entry in hand and an invoice in hand, ready for them to pay us. And that was like not a realistic possibility with the way that we were doing it. At one point, like you mentioned, it was small enough, tight enough that it was, but that was a big issue for us that we just didn't have a solution for, and a pretty big pain point.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because when I talk to customers or just shops in general, like as they kind of hit that tipping point, the invoicing and the ability to get invoices out the door on time, it starts to rear its head, and then kind of the areas that people first look on the surface make sense, but they actually end up not being really like the cause of the issue. So it's
Sure.
like, all right, well, it takes us 3 weeks, 4 weeks all of a sudden to get an invoice out the door. We need to look at like our invoicing person, or why is our billing person going slow? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, wait, hold on. You didn't set any of this stuff. You don't know what the cost of the parts are. You don't know how much anybody worked on specific things. Like you don't know what a fair price to charge somebody. And then I'm asking a usually an admin person or a billing person that maybe knows it from doing it for a while, but maybe has no context on the maintenance side or what goes
Yeah.
into it, to start making these like kind of pretty big financial and customer decisions. And it's a focus there, but it's, you got to fix it upstream in
Yeah.
order for it to actually solve it downstream. That's
Yeah.
what I've
Exactly.
found.
Exactly. The more that you can have in and correct at the very beginning, the less work it is on the back end. So anything that you can get cost, get what was used, get times, get information up front, definitely, it saves a lot of work on the back end. And even today, as far as our company, EBIS handles all that for us, but it still can be a struggle sometimes of just making sure guys are putting in their stuff, making sure our
Hmm.
parts team is putting in costs and accurate sell pricing. And yeah, absolutely, it's all starts upstream to get a good product coming out the end. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so now that you've gone from, you know, you're on the line, you're growing with the company, you're kind of solving all these problems. One of the areas that you've landed in is the finance side, and understanding that, and kind of being right in the middle of that process. So I wanted to ask you, and we could kind of take this wherever you want to go, but when you're looking at the financials for a maintenance shop, or in this case, because you do multiple things, you've got charter and the management side, but I guess if we could focus on the maintenance shop to start, what are the things that you look at to identify how we're doing? Are we successful? Are we heading the wrong direction? Like, do you view it as, are there particular metrics that you look at and then adjust from there? Do you view it as like a bigger picture? How do you look at that and start to gauge, here's where we are in the business, and then here's what we need to change or adjust to move the right
yeah,
direction?
sure. So I'll say as a company in total, the top down overview financial for us has always been really hard. And I think that stems from just growing fast and, not having systems in place in the first place. So that's an area, especially over the past maybe 2 years, we've really been focusing in on, is getting like a good top down financial view of how we're doing as a company and even as a maintenance shop as a whole. But we really haven't been there thus far, and we're still working towards that. So from a maintenance shop specific level, we really do everything all the way at the base level. So, as far as how we're doing as a shop, we're looking at it on a project basis,
Okay.
and that's really where we're starting and a lot of times finishing to see if we're making money, if we're trending in the right direction, if we're taking too much time, if we're spending too much on this. It's all going to start there on a specific project level, and practically what that looks like for us is airplane comes in, we work on it. Like I had mentioned, we use a time clocking system, an app. So, all the mechanics are going to clock in and out to this project. all that time is going to be consolidated, and that's what we do our payroll time from. So
Okay.
we hold that time as like the most accurate thing because they want to get paid, right? So
Yeah.
they're going to put their times in there, and then on the opposite side in EBIS, they're going to put all their stuff in. They're going to clock their time to the items in the work order. They're going to put their parts in, all that. And then at the end of a project, we can marry those two things up. So we can see our parts costs. Those are all getting fed into EBIS from purchase orders. And then we can see our labor totals as to what we've billed out versus how much time they've clocked and we've paid. And so we can get a pretty accurate per invoice or per work order picture of, are we making money? Are we doing good on labor? Are we doing good on parts? And most of the time, as a shop, we can just look at the trends of those things and know, hey, this month the jet shop kicked out 50 invoices. Out of those, we did an analysis of 40 of those because they were worth our time doing, and we know that we were making money on these ones, and we know we came out ahead about this much per each one, so we know we're doing good in this shop versus maybe in another shop, oh, we kicked out 30 invoices here, and there were 4 or 5 that didn't look so good, and we kind of came out in the red because it took too long or didn't quote right. And that's really how we do it. It's on a per project basis, and
Okay.
that's just to keep track of that, rather than a big top down view.
When you go through that process and you assess these and you say, okay, these projects are profitable, or these projects aren't, or this is close or it was off by a little bit. I'll let you decide if you want to talk on like the more positive side of it or on the things that you found weren't as profitable. But once you find that information, what do you do with it? What's the kind of next step that you take now that this project's profitable or not profitable? Like what's kind of the next step that you take from there?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there's a lot of variables to that. Every project realistically is different, and depending on how that project goes for us, it's really going to determine the outcome. To speak on a little bit of both sides of it, uh, we, like I mentioned, we have a lot of beach jets. We really like working on beach jets, and we've done it so much, we're real good at it. So it's really common for us to get a beach jet in here, do an inspection, or do a repair item that we're used to, and on the back end of that, do the bill. We come out, we're ahead, and for us, we can just know, hey, we know how long this should have taken. We did it in that time or less. We know we're making money on parts. And so it really reinforces, and we can spread that across the team of, hey, we like this project. We want to keep doing this project. We want to bring in more of these projects because it does us good. We know how to do it. We know we can make money at it. We know how much the parts cost, know how much it takes. And we will, tend to lean towards those kinds of things, because we're familiar with it. And then
Okay.
on the other side of the coin, um, uh, I'll be a little bit specific. We really don't like pipers in this shop. Uh, they're just hard. They're old airframes. They're hard to get parts for, and so we've had a few Navajos that we've just gotten absolutely hosed on. It's like no matter what we do, we can't do it in enough time. We can't get parts for the pricing that we need them, and so we've just learned for those, like if a Navajo comes in here, we got to tell the guys, hey, this is going to be a hard project. Like we got to stay 100% efficient. There can't be any wasted time if we're going to make money. We gotta put in the extra effort to source parts at a good price. We can't just buy the first ones we find. And even to the point sometimes that it's like, hey, no matter what we do, I know we're not going to make money on this project because we've seen it before. So maybe we're just going to turn that customer away and say, sorry, we can't work on this airplane. And of course, there's an in between to all those things.
Sure.
It can vary, but I would say absolutely there's a benefit to knowing good or bad where you're at with the project, and changes get made after every invoice depending on that, whether it's bring more of those in, turn some of those away, coach the guys from an efficiency standpoint or what they need to be doing. So
Okay, so it sounds like once you break it down, you're kind of getting you're getting that assessment out to the rest of the team and the different departments at this point, right? So it's like, okay, this was profitable. We did this on time. Customer was happy. We, this was smooth. You could reach out to the sales team. You could reach out to sales and marketing, basically business development in general, and say like, go get us more of these. This is really in our sweet spot. And then from a logistics side, as it goes with parts, well, I do want to ask about labor as well, but if we stick with parts for right now, you're managing that piece. How does that inform what you do with parts ordering and making sure you have the right quantity of certain things? Like how do these breakdowns, and retroactive views of the work orders, how does that impact how you guys order parts and stock things?
Yeah. So as far as parts well, I'll speak to just parts ordering for a work order versus stocking first. So as far as parts ordering goes, our across the board goal is to be at 10%, 10% over cost. So we're selling things at 10% markup, and across the board, as long as we're making that per invoice or over a series of invoices, generally we're pretty happy. And with that being said, we don't have to worry a whole too much about ordering, keeping that in mind because we know whatever we order, whatever price it's at, we're going to mark up 10%. And as long as our customer's okay with that and they're happy, then we're happy. We're making our little cut. And we can just keep track of that retroactively. I've yet to ever have a time that that's not really the case. You know, EBIS makes it pretty easy. You put in your cost and it's going to mark it up for us. And that really is what it is, unless there's an issue. I don't know, maybe with something that didn't get approved, something the customer doesn't want to pay for. But from a parts perspective, we don't have to worry about that. That's going to be on the customer relations side, keeping them happy. So it's not too hard. I'm hoping I'm answering your question. But
Does that impact, like, how do you, so that makes sense on the pricing side for the markups and things. Does it have any impact on how you guys forecast and plan for ordering parts and things like that? Does it have any impact there?
yeah, of course it does. I'd say a lot more of that of forecasting and deciding what we stock is a lot more based on not as much what's happening from an invoice perspective or a billing perspective, but really just on a utilization standpoint.
Okay.
I'll always keep referring back to the beach jets because that's what we love. But um, that's one thing that's great with EBIS. We can look at a series of invoices and know, like, oh man, we're using a ton of starter generators right now. I know I normally keep 6 in stock. Maybe we need to try to get 8, this month or to go forward. And we do absolutely use that. The more that things are getting used, you notice trends, and we'll try to hold on to more. Or one thing that's really nice from a parts perspective with us is we're here in Wichita, so Textron's local.
Yeah.
So it makes my job really easy dealing with parts all day because I don't have to worry about stocking a whole lot. There are common consumables I'll always keep around, and there are common rotables I'll always keep around just because we need to. But for the most part, we can always knock on Textron's door and get what we need. And if we can't, then we're in the same boat as everybody else, and just got to source and order.
Got it. Okay, cool. So there is some capacity planning there in terms of like what parts are going to be needed, taking a look at the historical trends of here's what came through the door, in the past year. Here's what we used, here's how we should plan for this. And then what about on the the technician side? You mentioned, helping technicians like increase efficiency and the training side of that. How do you guys look at these breakdowns and then use that to teach technicians to help get, this next generation that's coming up to get that skill set? Because it's a huge thing that everybody's dealing with. We're about to have, I mean, it's a wave that's already, the wave is already breaking, but we
Yeah,
just have to wait for it to happen,
yeah,
of X amount of people with all these skills and all the years and decades of knowledge leaving the workforce. And then you've got a new generation that's coming in. So it's like, how much info can we get from one group of people to the next in a short period of time? So how do you guys kind of tackle that side?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's definitely a tricky one. Of course, just to start with, to know how the guys are doing, you got to know how much time they're taking to do the things that we want them to do, and how much time it should take. And you have to be pretty selective, or at least we are pretty selective as far as how fine tooth of a comb we want to go into. Um, it makes a big difference. Just we find, at least, if people are willing to get in and learn and work hard, generally they're going to be successful, and they're going to be doing what they need to do and coming under quotes. And so it's really just a matter of finding the things, from a reporting standpoint, of when that's not happening and why that's not happening. And there's so many variables there. It could be, did they really not know what they're doing? They couldn't find a reference in the maintenance manual, and it took them an hour to do something that should have taken 5 minutes because they were, not had the information they need. And so that's kind of what it's about. Just trying to, from a reporting standpoint, see, well, why are things taking longer than they should, and then how can we address those things, and teach people how to do that. And from a shop perspective, we don't do a lot of, like, we don't send the guys out for specific training per aircraft type. It's a lot of on the job training, a lot of in house training, and mostly what that is just working with someone that knows.
Mm-hmm.
We get someone new in, and we can stick them with someone that has a lot of experience on the airframe, and they can show them the way and show them what to look for and show them how to do it. And when there are deficiencies, we can always lean back on that. It's just a matter of finding who and when and why, and then getting everybody the help they need, because everybody wants to do a good job, and everybody wants to do the right thing, and have the product of a safe airplane, and make the company money and make themselves money. And it's just a matter of making sure everybody's equipped to do that, from the high level to the low level. So.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because like one of the things that I notice as I go into shops too, like regardless of how whatever systems they set up, and I'm always, when I go in these shops, I'm always looking at it from a software perspective, because that's what company I'm with. That's kind of where I've been for a long time. So I kind of look at the processes and see how people do things, and it is kind of easy to default to being like, well, this is all disjointed, so you guys are doing it wrong or whatever. It's more like what I actually see when I go into places is people will have disconnected systems. They'll have all these things that are in a way like broken or not the most efficient. But when I look at the people doing those jobs, they've generally optimized as far as they can. Like
Right.
it's not so much a, you may look at what's happening and go like, these people are doing a bad job here because they haven't figured out X. But when you get into the weeds of it, a lot of times I'll see like, oh, actually they can tell you their process A to Z. They know exactly where these things go. And you look at what they're working with, and like, actually I figured this out, this out, this out. I speed it up this way. And it's like kind of hit a limitation of what they've been given. So I'm curious if you end up seeing that on the technician side when you do these deep dives, does it show you anything about the company that you go, oh, actually, they're doing a really good job. Here's where we can improve. Do you guys ever notice that kind of thing in the process?
Ooh, that's a hard question to answer. I think
Okay.
there are of course things like that. There's always going to be limitations with the process, that even if the guys are doing the absolute utmost, that you can't improve on, unless you're doing a system change. It's hard for me to pinpoint any, like, specific areas of that. But
Sure.
of course, there always are going to be, and that's of course the goal, is where can you find those things and improve them. And um, as you learn as a company, I think you find those things and you can address them. And we're certainly doing that even today. So.
Nice. I saw, I don't know when the post was from, but I saw that you guys are hiring technicians. It said we're always hiring. What's that been like getting, like, are you guys hiring? Are you guys growing on that side? And what has that process been like to find technicians and bring people in?
Yeah, pretty much ever since I've worked here, we've been hiring forever. It seems like, at
Okay.
least from a maintenance perspective. Um, I will say it's pretty hard. Especially in the Wichita area, there are a lot of aviation companies. There's a lot of other MROs. There's a lot of maintenance shops. There's the big companies. You got Textron here, which is Cessna and Beach. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of opportunities for aviation technicians in this area. So getting people in here is hard. We like giving people a shot, and there is a Wichita State, or Wichita Tech is here in Wichita. It's actually just like a block down the road from us. So there's a lot of younger guys coming up, just graduating school, getting their A&P license and applying here. And so it's there's a lot of people that are interested. It's all just a matter of what we need in the moment. Do we just need bodies? Are we willing to take someone that we can have time to teach up and train from scratch, or do we need experience? And that's a constant teeter totter of one way or
Yeah.
another. All that to say, it does seem like we're hiring all the time, and we have been. We're always bringing people in for interviews, but it does change a lot just depending on who we have in the shop. Um, whether we're bringing in new guys and trying to train them up, or trying to get more experienced people in, and that changes week to week. It seems like, just based on our needs, it changes so fast.
And then you feel like a crazy person because you're like, I was so sure that this was the right path
Right.
4 days ago, and then now new information comes out, new things that we have to deal with, new challenges, new opportunities, whatever it might be. So it's this, yeah, I'm finding that that's anything. I think it's really like this constant reassessment of like, okay, are we moving the right direction? What new has happened? What new factors do we have to contend with? Okay, we were 60% correct on what we were looking for.
Yeah.
Here, let's fill it in with this. And then you kind of start the process over the next week, 2 weeks later, whatever it is. But I think that's an important piece that you just mentioned there. I think I don't know. I don't know how old you are, but I'm 32, so I'm kind of hitting this like that phase in my career where you're involved in all this stuff, and the decisions that you make actually matter. Like the things that you do actually have real repercussions, and it's just interesting you say that because the more that you get into these roles that things actually matter, the more you realize, oh, I don't actually know everything, and all of these plans that I've got to kind of adjust and move forward. You can't be like you know a little wind comes your way and then you blow over and you fall apart. But it's
Right.
like, oh, okay, well, this assumption wasn't exactly right. I got to just keep moving and
Yeah.
keep figuring it out.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I can totally agree with that. Especially, the more and more people we get in, the bigger we get. No matter which way we go, it's going to affect our employees. It's going to affect our customers. So it's all just a balancing act.
Yeah. Well, what has that been like to, as you're growing? I mean, you don't go from, I don't know, roughly 10 people to roughly 130 people if everybody hates being there, and it's a terrible company. Like, that's a
Yeah.
that's a pretty that's a pretty steep trajectory, and you don't really get that kind of growth if you don't have a lot of people that are marching the same direction and kind of working towards a single purpose. So like, how do you, I guess, either if you want to answer it from a company perspective, how do you guys kind of keep that culture in place, or if you want to answer it from your perspective, like what do you do to kind of facilitate that?
Yeah, I think honestly I can answer both kind of in the same way. It definitely stems from the top, and at the top, the heart of our company is we're family owned. Dwayne, our owner, started the company, and it's him and his wife and kids that run every aspect of it. So, um, at the heart, we got a family that just loves aviation and wants to do everything to be involved in aviation and support customers and get to live a life full of that. And that really trickles down. So I would say, as far as when you get down into the individual shops and our growth regarding that, we're really easygoing. We're not a very corporate red tape type of company, and that trickles all the way down to, people at the lowest levels. It we don't want anything to be complicated for the sake of it being complicated. We don't want there to be any red tape where there doesn't need to be. Like, if you need to do something, just ask and you can do it. It doesn't have to be a big deal, and it doesn't have to be a really high pressure environment. I think is a lot of it too. We're all here to do a job, and of course it is important to maintain safety, and when you're working on airplanes, of course, making sure that things are safe and signed off and inspected correctly. But at the same time, there doesn't need to be a lot of stress added to that from a systems level and
Yeah.
top down pressure level. It's
Yeah,
really
keep the
just
pressure, where it actually matters. Keep the pressure on the safety, on the compliance, on those pieces, and then don't add in this unnecessary BS for the sake of, whatever
yeah,
people add that in for.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, even if that's not a spoken philosophy, I think that's the goal. Is we're all here to do a job, and
Hmm.
whatever we can do to come in and do that job well and enjoy doing it, that's the goal, from the top to the bottom. So,
Do you, I don't want to make an assumption here, but it sounds like the customer focus or the customer experience seems to be paramount to making an environment like that, where it's like everybody's moving the same direction, but it's to help the customer and take care of them. Is that a fair assessment of
yeah.
like where you guys are focused on?
Oh yeah, I would say so. I mean, especially the more you grow, the farther the customer versus the guy working in the shop gets,
Yeah.
from removed. But especially, back in the day, like, we got jet customers flying beach jets all around the country, and they're like in our shop in the morning, like, "Hey, what are you doing to this thing today?" So yeah, keeping them happy is obviously the most important thing, aside from keeping them safe. But if they're not happy, they're not coming back to us, and they're not going to continue, giving us their business. So that's the most important thing, and having a relationship with them, um, throughout, is something still, I think, that it's really important. Even today, guys come into the shop all the time. So even though the guys on the floor may not be directly interfacing with customers, they see them around. They know, oh, so and so owns this airplane. I've heard that name before. We know who they are, and want to take care of them because, at the end of the day, they're the ones taking care of us. Without their business, we wouldn't have a job. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's that mutual respect and kind of understanding. That's the dance, right?
yeah,
Like we're here
absolutely,
because of them, they're here because of us, and like let's do the best version we can. It's interesting you say that distance gets bigger as you grow. That is a tough thing to manage when you go from having the bandwidth and kind of just the setup to be able to have those individual conversations,
yeah,
and then to kind of hitting a bandwidth and a setup where they don't happen naturally. It's not it's not as frequent, and it's hard to keep that be part of the culture as you get distance and all that. It's really easy to lose sight of. You see it happen to a lot of people, and then the customers just end up becoming like a theoretical thing,
right,
versus like an actual person that I'm helping. And then you see it in the NPS scores, like the customer surveys and all that kind of stuff.
right,
And
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting how it's a universal problem in any business, and just got to tackle it the best you can. But it's easy to lose focus of the customers as the
Yeah,
most important thing.
certainly. And what, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but I've realized it in my own life. It's definitely shaped the way I view other people. Because I take my truck in a maintenance shop, and I'm like, man, these guys like don't care about me at all. They just want to fix my truck and get me to pay my bill and get me out the door. But I don't know, working with customers and making sure they're taken care of and they take care of us. It I don't know. It obviously makes a difference, and I think even if it's not at the forefront of your mind, it shapes kind of the culture of your company, like you mentioned. So
Yeah. Well, and plus, if I mean, you personally were in it. So you got to see like on the ground level and then working it up and then doing what you're doing now. So it's like another part of that is building those relationships with customers over time to
oh
where,
yeah,
like, even if the process does get a little bit more impersonal and that particular person doesn't love that they have to kind of go through the normal channels, but if you have that outside relationship, you can help move things along when it's like, okay, if you need help, in my case, like resetting your password, I don't mind sending it to like the main channel. But if you
right,
go like, hey, I really need help, like this bigger business problem we're trying to solve, like I need to talk to somebody, like, can you help? Then if you have that relationship, I'd imagine it's something similar. It's like, hey, we got to get this inspection done, and I really apologize, I should have called you a month ago, but I have a business trip that I need to go on in 2 weeks.
right.
Is there any way you could help me out?
Yep, and that happens so frequently.
Yeah.
Like exact scenario, but yeah, that's absolutely true, and it's those kind of relationships that I think they make great customers going forward, and that's why I'm sure, like many other people that run maintenance shops, you get phone calls at 8 o'clock on a Saturday because someone's stranded somewhere, but they know if they can just get a hold of you, you can help, and I guess in the end, that's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah, really is. Well, I mean, this was awesome. Thanks for doing this. Is there anything before we wrap up, anything that you want to touch on?
Oh, I don't think so specifically. I think just happy to get to share some of the small amount of knowledge that we've learned here and pass it along. So
Cool. Well, thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Cool. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.